So I realized when I chose to channel the Zohar as my influence that it was a challenging gesture, but my immediate gestures towards poets who are influences were all influenced by the Zohar. So I thought to myself that I would go to my influences, and see what was influencing them. A couple beginning words I would like to say, which are timely, is that when Evan asked me to do this, it was right after Passover, which was the middle of April. And when I agreed to say yes, when I said yes, and then said that I would talk about the Zohar, then when I started to do more research, I realized that the 49 days between Passover and Shavuot, which is Tuesday, are called the counting of the Omer, and the 49 days are, each day is a meditation upon different aspects of the tree of life, and you say on one day you would meditate upon this aspect and this aspect, or this aspect and this aspect. And sometimes they are opposites of each other, like you would want to think about what is the mercy of severity, or what is the wisdom of severity, or what is the eternity of severity. And each day is devoted to, your thought should be geared towards thinking about that. And so I've been trying to get into that frame of mind since saying yes and up until now. And what was interesting to me on one level is that this structure provides this framework to escape mechanisms of time, such as the week or the calendar, to bring your thought to a focal point, which is other than the next minute or the next day or the week ahead. So that basic stroke of some other point to bring your mind to. And today is Netzach of Yesod, which is the victory, the eternity, the endurance, confidence of foundation. And it's also Shabbat, which is, I'll talk about that later. So I'm going to go between what I wrote and then fragments of poems, which are like we've been donning our hats to Derek and saying that this is a process. I have a lot of scattered fragments of poems. What I feel mostly compelled by with the Zohar is that they're so obsessed with language, down to the letters in the Hebrew language. Every Hebrew letter has a numeral, so these permutations are performed. And also the Hebrew language works in a system of roots. So when a word shares the same root as another word, they inevitably share a meaning, which is sometimes readily known, sometimes a little more mysterious. So I'm going to go back and forth between what I wrote and poems, because I'm always interested in how something that happens or something that I write or think always means something other than what I think it means, which is a difficult way to live, but it's always on its toes. So it is called One Song, Two Letters, Three Dreams, 4,748 words, Jacaranda, Apocrypha, Quanta, Arena. The letters are correspondences. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala Penei Shabbat Nekabala. I was laying on my stomach, sifting silt from my fingers, looking out upon gray, craggy stones. To my left, a stone sculpted into a forearm coming out of the ground with a hand cupping the sky. I was excited because I thought I was in Sfat, the Kabbalistic center in Israel, 10 minutes from my mother's kibbutz. I could almost see it. But then I realized I was in Eilat. My mother asked, "How do you know where you are?" Which is when I answered, "I remember certain stones." I walked over to a cave, took off my necklace, made of glass, very heavy, more like a hanging ornament. I placed it on a seat in the cave, asked my mother to remind me to remember it was here, but as I looked at it, I looked into what it was, the Hebrew letter shalom, and I reflected that shalom was itself an instrument of remembering, the words geared towards memory itself. So I told my mother she didn't have to remind me. Later in the day, outside of Dream, my sister telephoned me, asking if I could remember what I had written on a pair of red Converse sneakers I had once given her. I couldn't remember, so asked her if she had any sense of the words, if she could remember anything at all, and then suddenly she remembered. She said, "If what we see remembers us half as well as it remembers itself, she or the words remembered." I blame the parade of the ways of the world, all tomato, unpredicted bird. The mentation of the blessed overcomes me in small incisions. When I was a kid, I lived 4 houses away from our synagogue. I was proud but also perturbed that I lived so close to the temple. I remember the square cutouts of rainbow glass in the otherwise white structure. I remember my teacher, Francie, her bad knees, writing the word God on the chalkboard with a dash instead of an O, writing the word for God in Hebrew, then instantly erasing the word. The eraser dust was mist. I remember curiously eyeing the letters of the dreidel on Hanukkah, cocked on its side after having been spun, how vulnerable I was to the letter's power, eagerly in need of knowing if I was going to get all the chocolate coins or half of the coins, or have to give away all of my coins or do nothing at all, have none and give none. Each week after Hebrew school had finished, it was dark. All the kids had to stand behind a rope. The head of the Hebrew school was Nancy Levin. She furiously darted around like a chicken, her pantyhosed ankles pinched into her low, modest heels, chaperoning children to the vehicles in which their mother or father waited impatiently behind the wheel. The rabbi had a parking spot reserved for himself. The word rabbi was painted in white on the gravel. I remember staring at it every time I walked up to it. Rabbi, I thought. I didn't understand. I thought it was a disease I feared, in which raccoons or sometimes dogs contracted it, involving a lot of foaming at the mouth. Why was this man I was meant to revere also a disease I feared but had never seen? His curly hair is combed with teardrops. The restaurant devoted to his grungy art is postponed. We moved from the Tree of Life to the Black Springs. We shifted from a familiar locale to history and slavery. We can barely greet the tree. I'm thinking of poetry as mysticism inside of religious history, as what is most alive, and religion as the dying of this life. In the major trends of Jewish mysticism, Gershom Scholem writes on the subject of mysticism, Dr. Rufus Jones, in his excellent Studies in Mystical Religion, defines his subject as follows. I shall use the word mysticism to express the type of religion which puts the emphasis on immediate awareness of relation with God, on direct and intimate consciousness of the divine presence. It is religion in its most acute, intense, and living stage. He later writes, moreover, as Evelyn Underhill has rightly pointed out, the prevailing conception of the mystic as a religious anarchist who owes no allegiance to his or her religion finds little support in fact. History rather shows that the great mystics were faithful adherents of the great religions. He later says, religion's supreme function is to destroy the dream harmony of man. More than any other emotion in Hebrew school, I was bored. Was I surrounded by instruments, prayers, histories, meant not to inspire devotion, but to tamp and destroy my dreams? Was I in attendance hour after hour to feel the division between what I felt and the language I was given to feel it with? Iris hour, concuss, pizzazz, asterisk, the chair, the chair, the chair, the door, anxiety, I bus risk. Letter 1. I go to phonemes as authorities of origin, as others may go to authors. Though yesterday Robert Duncan's collected later poems and plays arrived, and I found it on my doorstep, the box opened, the image attached to this email. In the introduction to the book, he is quoted, I belong to a community that has never come into being, that throughout history I find just coming into being. I am not my character, my personality, my mind, my psyche, my spirit, my body, but as in the writing. What strikes me in the attached image was the box the book came in, the double-facing A's with the ones next to the A's, and Robert Duncan's face on the books in between the symbols, the poet framed by the number and the letter. The other day I was teaching at a school near Land's End, way out in San Francisco. Midday, a kindergartner working on her handwriting looked off dreamily, then turned to me and asked, how do you spell the letter A? Prom-planing, double-breasted, boustrophodon, navy blue, showstone, cockadoodle doodling. Lehandodi, likrat kala, lehandodi, likrat kala. Letter 2. I may have been born hyperbolically, or birth is hyperbolic, but your last email was the most stirring, or note in general, I can remember receiving. To be invited into, and to even feel like company can be had within the space of the phonemically free, or rather bound is the invitation, formed by a question I was so heartened to hear. So much has happened since I last wrote, from the world of children to the realm of my peers. The day after I wrote to you, I was at recess with a kindergartner at the Laurel School in San Francisco. I was holding the kindergartner's hand, or I took his hand as he was walking, stumbling around the playground. He was so small. Other kids were playing soccer and basketball, oblivious to him. I was worried he would get hit. When I took his hand, I saw that he had been walking on, tracing letters written on the pavement with his feet. The letters were large and said something to the cars parked just beyond them, something like, do not pass. When I took his hand, he screamed and said, no, I wanted to do the letters. I wanted to do the letters. And then as I gently pulled him away to my dismay, but wanting him to be safe from the battleground playground, he added, the letters are not in the words. The letters are not in the words. Each afternoon before Hebrew school began, we recited prayers. We recited the Shema, considered the holiest prayer. I wanted to write about the Zohar, but then I discovered that much of Jewish liturgy, rituals performed in synagogues, are derived from ecstatic, mystical texts and experiences. I am wagering that before prayer, there is poetry. Loud chords, funds bank, obsess, still shatter, bathtub, gloriography, stage land, ching-ching, vulnerable, insinuated cloth, headache, secret, lost on the furniture, beeline, a library of goodness waltzing sexually, white light down the sides of his eyes, obsessional lava. Dream 2. I was in a small seaside town by the harbor. I was with Z. We were watching his parents interact with one another. We were children, but our presence, our participation in the action was not apparent. We were onlookers. Z's mother was beautiful. The wind was blowing gently, brushing her hair across her face. She was peaceful. I could see houses carved into the dark green forest cliffside. Z's father is moving around. I notice his legs are strong, the legs of a hiker. Softly his father, then his mother too, become my friend D's mother and father, then gently change back into Z's. His father walks over to his mother, tells her he's learning something new, asks if he can try it on her, if she's willing. She agrees, and he asks her to hold her hands gently over his. She does, and then he asks, "What do you feel?" She says she feels stressed. He asks her then, "What does this mean?" She answers, "There is another Torah there." D sets his image over the crowd, not even sure how his whisperical friendships. He is uprightly inside the side, the synth, the glyph. The wallpaper is not the color of seashells. When you go onto the balcony, watch as the universal harmony speeds up and slows down. What the Zohar teaches is that there is always another meaning. Kabbalists studied meaning and the language that gave meaning. Abraham Abulafia did not exactly think, but was more concerned with what was actively concealed within the letters of his thought. The written word was said, the Torah, the written word, was said to exist before the world. Studying the written word meant studying what was before the world. Before the world is a strange teleological fragment implying a belief in a beginning of a world and the world before the world. The Zoharic commentary of Genesis dismantles the beginning line as meaning at the head, so it suddenly becomes unclear if Genesis is mapping the human body, painting the brain as the origin of creation, as the world as it appears to you every moment you see it, or if the beginning of life is not solely the making of the human body, but just as it lays out the sequence of days in the making of the world, it also shows how the human body continuously mirrors the origin of creation. The text is often referred to as pseudepigraphic, meaning quotes from authorities of the past are made up, marooned. The weight of the world bears down on those who study the letters. Kabbalists have to furiously write more and more combinations of magical symbols in order to be relieved of the weight of the words of the world. Each letter in Hebrew has a numerical value. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, and so on, up to 22 letters. There are 7 days of creation. There are 7 days of the week. The Sabbath is the day when God rested, beginning 17 minutes before sundown on Friday, and when 3 stars rise in the sky on Saturday. It is said on this day individuals are to be filled with additional souls. The Sabbath is the day in which the other world pervades. It is the guiding light, the inspiration for the remaining days of the week. Friday, looking through the window of Thursday to Friday, looking through the glass doors of Wednesday to Friday, looking through the peephole of Tuesday to Friday, looking through the mountain of Monday to Friday, looking through the wall of Sunday, from the message Saturday coined, lying on the other side of the wall, to now within the wall, inside the medium, firmament, filament. The weather effects a quiet symbolized dryness, violin colloquial, old soul terrarium, gematria obsequious, we climb inside to crack the batty acrobatic, acoustic acrostic, accosting days of days, ignominious aria, a body where the first letter of every person's name is every person smiling, a single purple petal he strips for the red, falsehood blurred flashes, taillights, day and night, diurnal jacks, unravel the insult of sunset, faint screech of an electric saw, far enough to sound soft. Tetragrammaton, jackhammering, waterfall, many memory, vanish, wavelength, faith, infinite, commonplace, weakness of weeks. The other days of the week are engineered to correspond with the 6 Sephirot of the tree of life. Each day corresponds to a different Sephirah. Sephirah in Hebrew means number, but what is number? The tree of life is laid on its side. Z was accompanying me on the ferry from Oakland to San Francisco. On the ride over, I spoke to him of Bina, the Sephirah, which I read was the only way to contact the Sephirah in the higher worlds not included on the tree.
Bina is sometimes translated simply as intellect, sometimes as recompense. We wondered why. Z commented that maybe heaven was necessarily apologetic of the rest of the world that couldn't see it. When we exited the ferry, I turned to Z and whisperingly asked if he thought all the people boarding the ferry looked strange, spandex and oddly shaped legs. We walked towards the exit as two streams of people boarding conducted a current on both sides of our bodies. As we continued walking, drawing closer and closer to the doors that led to the exit, it was suddenly unclear to me how we would get out. Through both doors, people entered, poured in, teeming, eager to board. I was stifled, stopped before a man-sized window of glossy glass that met my face and my body's gaze. Then Z said to me, "I think that's a door." I walked up to it. It was a door. We walked through. "This must be Bina," he said. "What leads you to the higher worlds?" Gershom Scholem writes, "Man becomes aware of a fundamental duality of a vast gulf, which can be crossed by nothing but the voice." Lecha dodi likrat kala. Letter 3. Please forgive me as I thank you. Your letter is pointed, starred, by moments of which I will return in a closer, more paced engagement, but for now am inspired by your stages of letters to also respond in stages. So this letter will be the first, a responsive surface bound to yours by the tie that is time and the information of events and thoughts that made this cross. What most quickly arcs the foreground is a house I visited today. Upon passing through the front gate, I remembered it was the house in a dream I had months ago. Outside of dream, the house was designed by my sister's best friend's father. He is a lawyer. He was designing the house with his partner at the time. When the foundation was built, their relationship dissolved, but he continued to have the house built. His older daughter was my best friend in high school. We lost touch when we went separate ways for college, at the point at which my little sister became close with her little sister. The address of the house is 2424 Clement. When turning onto the street, I looked up the definition of clement and found inclined to be lenient or merciful. The repetition of 24 felt like it was strengthening the inclination towards this disposition. My friend was there. I had seen her over Thanksgiving when she had been visiting her sister in Oakland, but we still had been very out of touch. Before going over to their house, my sister briefly told me that she hadn't been feeling very well. About 5 years ago, she was diagnosed with a rare and intense autoimmune disorder and had received results in the past couple of days that were unexpected, indicating a very low white blood cell count. We gave each other a warm hello, but she quickly lay down on the couch and went to sleep. Then the three of us remaining, myself, my sister, and her friend, walked outside to the back of the house. I asked her if there was a fire pit in the backyard because there was a volcano in my dream. She said there was, so I asked them if they wanted to go on a tour of my dream. I told them my dream as we walked around the house to the different places where the dream took place. The dream began in a shack. Why do I remember what I do not need? Pinochle, her fear of jello, her love of not enough time, a pig she sculpts beside the human figure. Naked, she fell asleep on the patio table, woke up and was lost in a garden, prey to the sound of a rooster, a cock-a-doodle-doodling woman, dog, human around, needing love or dispensation, untidy. I put the ink aside, shut up eyes. The dream began in a shack with an old wood stove, a television on, faintly listened to, exposed plumbing, the detail which made me feel most sorry for this place of living. I see my mother, she turns, she's pregnant, and then realize she's pregnant with me. Instantly the dream becomes filmic. The camera, or the point of visual focus, veers away from her shelter, out to the window through which she looks. She gazes up to a magnolia tree or maybe oleander, large white flowers. The camera recedes back to her body, to her dwelling, her indwelling, then to the window, out again, up and blissfully, almost diving upwards into the flowers, a vision extended. The eye begins breathing. I realize her breathing is guiding appearance, and that I am the not yet born within her, experiencing this, one body removed from her, within her. I begin to not feel as sorry for the shack she lives in because she gazes up into such a beautiful tree. I then walk to the front of the house and register that it is a modern mansion in front of the shack in which my mother was living. When I reach the front of the house, there is a table, chairs, plates, and drinks on which a breakfast or brunch has been partially abandoned. It seems like the people sitting there were called suddenly away from their dining. I walk away from this ghostly evidence and meet my father on the side of the house. He is much younger, probably the age he was when my mother was pregnant with me. He offers me marijuana. I refuse, but we walk together to the back of the house. As we are walking to the back patio, I move slower, as I begin to see the backs of many people staggered and frozen, gazing upon something in the center of the space. As I inch closer, I see that everyone is gazing into the mouth of a volcano. Their faces and their bodies are completely stilled, entirely unreadable. They are not like zombies. They are purely inaccessible. Yet each of them are pointed towards, their attention directed to, transfixed by the volcano. Again, it was important to discern they were not zombies. They were living, though not interpretable. I asked my father who they were. He answered he didn't know. Suddenly his spirit shot upwards into the air, a passionate parrot with the colors of a parrot. The top of a sewer was hovering in the sky. He, now parrot, hit the top of the sewer. The sewer became a mandala, and the dream was over. At the time I had this dream, I was reading an essay by Derrida called The Eyes of Language in a book called Acts of Religion, where he comments upon a letter that Gershom Scholem wrote to Franz Rosenzweig in 1926, where he is ominously and urgently expressing his belief that if the language of biblical Hebrew was taken and made into a conversational, colloquial form to be spoken in the state of Israel, then demonic, catastrophic forces would be unleashed. Specifically, that the sacred language, which was uttered only in the space of prayer and study, should not enter the space of casual exchange, or else the said forces would erupt. In the letter, Scholem employs repeatedly the image of a volcano that would build in intensity and eventually erupt apocalyptically. When I had this dream, this letter and the essay were fresh within me. I was thinking about the presences or the non-presences of the people surrounding the impending catastrophe, the unreadable, unknowable figures and forces gazing upon the space through which the end of the world could arise. I drew upon the sewer that became a mandala, thought of the elements of human use drawn downwards into a subterranean network unseen by the public eye, the material of which in my dream became the symbolic vessel with the overt intent to be looked into, to become the universe by. Now new freshnesses emerge from having walked in the house today, the house of my dream. That my friend's father is a lawyer, that his partner intended to build the house with him, though only stayed with him through the building of the foundation. What does this say about law? Who is or what is the partner to law? I think his partner was a lawyer too, so law left law. But to entertain for a moment that she was poetry, or could be, that poetry remains with law only up until the building of the foundation, and then poetry leaves and law continues, persists to live, build the house alone? Or is it more interesting that law leaves law, and the house is built, and a poet walks up to the house built by law, having left law at its foundation, and says the words out loud, "This house was in my dream"? That the house is situated upon the disposition towards mercy, that my friend whom I had lost touch with has been struggling with an autoimmune disorder, working through your insights upon the psyche of immunity, that there is a fundamental flaw law, and immunity, and please correct me because I am summarizing, but thinking towards how to unthink immunity, how to learn how to talk to, take in, feel the foreign body as one's own body. I feel this experience moves towards the boundlessness you speak of, which I am aimlessly again and again trying to become a convert of, to figure out new ways how to. Tonight at dinner, my sister was angry. I went to the restroom to wash my hands, and as I lifted up my hands, some of the water on them, a single drop, leapt onto the mirror. As I watched the drop of water slide quickly, then slowly, and increasingly slower down the mirror, I prayed that the fire of my sister's anger know the ever-slowing water on the mirror. I called to mind the space of the ocean we drove to earlier in the day together, how my throat has been feeling strangely sore, oddly hot, and called my throat fire, relegated the pain of it to fire's orders. So as I was in the restroom, I made a sort of cross-wind prayer pact between the fire in my throat and the fire of my sister's anger and the water on the mirror and the space of the ocean, because I knew I couldn't talk to her. I knew that whatever I said responding to her anger would get caught up in or further inflame her anger. Moments like this, I find what I call prayer in one form in public, words said silently, which could not work if otherwise spoken. Stop there.